Welcome to the Walled Garden Podcast. Here we nourish the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. If you'd like to find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Thanks for joining us. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. So, our guest for today is somebody who I've had on the show a couple of times before. His name is Joe Tucker. I can't say enough good things about Joe. I consider him to be a true friend. I consider him to be a true philosopher, and really a kindred spirit, a kindred soul of mine. Somebody who I find so much pleasure in talking to. He's a person who really loves people. He loves humanity, and he loves seeking out deeper wisdom for our lives, trying to understand how we can get through this life in, I guess with a little bit more equanimity, a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more appreciation for the beauty that is constantly surrounding us at all times. And it's for those reasons why I'm excited to just dive into this conversation and let you all just sink into the many twists and turns that we take it in. And I'm sure that you're going to love this. Now, I will let you know that next week we have another Walled Garden event, a live interview and Q&A with Mark Devine. Now, Mark recently had me on his show, The Unbeatable Mind, the Mark Devine show. And we talked about poetry, we talked about philosophy, wisdom, life and how to live it to the extent that I have any wisdom on that. And I found Mark to be such an insightful host and such an interesting character as well. He was a US Marines Navy SEAL. He's also a yogi, so he's a very interesting character. He's an angel investor. He's a very strong leader, somebody who really commands a lot of respect for his experience in life and also for that very interesting line balance that he walks between that kind of leadership, tough military, philosophy, and also the mystic world, the world of yoga, of spirituality. And I found him to be very interesting in that way. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We're going to be talking about his military service, leadership, and spirituality, all this good stuff. So we'd really love to see you there. And if you just go to thewalledgarden.com/events, you can actually find the page there where you can register for that event next week. So with all of that said, I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Joe Tucker, one of my favorite human beings in the world, and it was an honor to have him back on the show. So enjoy this conversation, and we'll see you around the Walled Garden. Sorry, I'm recording this. Let's just go.
Oh, okay.
We don't have to keep it in, but just talk to me.
So both my grandfathers, when I was younger, they were both on the phone at the same time. My grandfather answered the other one on speakerphone, and he goes through this whole diatribe of who might I say is calling and this and that. The other grandfather goes, "Hold on, I can't quite hear you." He goes, "I'm sorry, I can't. I'm a tad deaf. I can't hear you." And they're both doing it to each other. It was one of the funniest things I think has ever happened in my entire life. I had to leave the room. I couldn't be in the room when it happened. It was great.
Isn't that just the human condition, that what's going to happen to us is that one day we're going to have these, little, I don't know, alternate reality little goggles on, and we're going to be like, what? What? Who am I looking at here? We're gonna be like, I always remember this. One of my favorite comedians on the cruise ship when I was working on there. His name, oh gosh, I really wish I remembered his full name. His name is David someone, a beautiful fellow. And he had the funniest bit to start off with, because he'd come into the onto the stage, and cruises a whole bunch of old people, and
Mhm.
and he'd be like, if he got a little bit of a laugh from the audience, he'd be like, "Man, you guys are great. You should have seen the previous audience. They weren't dying; they were dead." He was like, "Oh, instead of laughs, all I heard was what? Who? What is he talking about, Willis?" Like, and I just love that, like, old American classic. Like, I don't know, man. It's great. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, specifically New York Jewish. That's what? What did he say? Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, man. It's great. And one day
Well,
we're going to
how
be those
is
old people. So yeah,
well,
and we're going
I
to
mean,
be
you
doing the
you look
exact
like
same
you work on a
thing.
cruise ship right now. I mean, you're
Let me tell you, this is a shirt that my wife got me for my birthday last year. It's got a whole bunch of strange fungus all over it. I like mushrooms and fungus, people might know, and people can make of that what they will. And that's as far as I'll go. But
okay.
um, it's funny you mentioned the cruise. Let me tell you something, Joe, and then we'll get into the pleasantries and how are you and all that sort of stuff. But I've been considering jumping back on the cruise ships with my jazz quartet, with a jazz quartet, um, as in the transitionary period over to America when we're going over there.
Mhm.
So the reason I'm considering that is because it's the best gig in the world if you can organize
Yeah.
it. It's like playing 3 hours every night in your own jazz club to sometimes an audience of one, I'll give you that. Sometimes an audience of, 50, 60.
But you're
And
playing.
but you're playing and you're having a good time. And so what my plan is if I do get this gig, what I would like to do is because I'll still be doing the mentoring, the coaching, and other various aspects of what we're doing in the walled garden. I'm hoping that will allow me to have enough money to spend on the Wi-Fi on the ship so that I can still run everything that we're doing
Right.
while at sea, and hopefully get my wife on the ship a bit as well. So yeah, just interesting little things coming up.
Well,
Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned that. I've been toying with the idea of living mobily again,
great.
just cause,
Go
you
on.
know, I miss it. I miss I don't know. I feel like living in an apartment makes me soft, you know, when you don't have the constant threat of what's going to happen today. It's kind of it kind of makes days a
So
little
you're
bit
a
more boring in a
masochist,
way.
okay?
Uh, I mean,
So you're a
yeah, a little
cynic.
bit. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I enjoy being able to just go and not really being tied down to any one location. Even in town, I like to be out and about, and I like where I live and the central location it's in. But at the same time, I miss the sense of adventure that you get put into when you don't really have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, so
um,
you
well,
said you're
cool.
thinking of going back to it.
Yeah,
So you've done this
yeah.
before. You've lived mobily going around, and well, you just set up a
Oh
little
yeah.
bed in your car or something like that.
So yeah, the first time I lived in a car for I don't know, a year and a half. Um, I moved into it because the person that I was supposed to be, I was moving to this town, Chattanooga, and my roommate I was supposed to get not the most reliable, hard to, we couldn't really find an apartment because neither of us had jobs yet, and he had no idea what he wanted to do, and I thought, well, why don't I just do it? I'll just do it, and I did. I took out the back seat of my car and converted my car into a camper, built like a platform for a bed, and I could hide it away and have like storage underneath. And so it was basically just a stealth camper in a car. Not as much space as I would like, um, but I accustomed to it. That said, afterwards I got a van and I built that out and I lived in that for a couple of years and that was great. I enjoyed it. it was too big. So now I need something along more of the lines of a like a crossover vehicle, you know.
So why was it too big?
Better gas mileage. Why is it too big? It's it's got a 3 foot high high top on it. So it needs like a spoiler in the front because otherwise it just gets blasted by wind when you go anything over than 60 miles an hour, and it's bad. So like going through the Southwest and the deserts, you're just you're shaking this way and that, you know, like it's
You're constantly wondering if it's just going to blow over.
oh yeah, yeah. And it never does. It never does. It's got a good center of mass, but it feels like being a boat on land. It's not always the best feeling. But I still have it, and I like I haven't even stepped in it in a while. I have it stored somewhere. But I need to, I don't know, kind of shit or get off the pot kind of situation, you know, either sell it or move back into it. You got to figure it out, you know.
You're a
Otherwise
mysterious
it's just
man,
sitting.
Joe.
What's the point? Do what?
You're a mysterious man. You're driving
Why?
across the deserts in a high top van. You've got it stored somewhere at the moment. You know, you're looking to go out on the road again. I don't know. It's it's mysterious, and I love it. It's great.
Well, I don't think there's well, there's no mystery to me, and I think that's what matters.
Yes.
I'm not mystified by myself. I'm pretty happy with how I do things. And
What are you running away from, Joe?
what am I running away from? Oh, that's a great question. The mundane. Here's the thing though, it follows you. You know, even in a van, you still have to wash dishes because I mean, it's the cheapest way to live is to, you know, cook yourself, and you still have to wash things, but how do you wash things if you don't have running water usually, you know?
Yeah.
So do you use, you know, do you figure out a way to make running water, or do you figure out new ways? Turns out vinegar is really great, kills everything off, you know. You don't have to use that much water to wash a dish. It's not as much as you'd think. Um, and it also keeps you from making too many dishes in the first place. Usually you just eat straight out of the skillet, you know.
I like that
But
approach. Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Oh man, I just remember the last time I went camping. Actually, it was I went camping by myself because I wanted to. This is when I went into this is okay. Now I'm going to be the mysterious one. I I went to the distant hills on the Sunshine Coast, and I went into the heart of the hills, and I traveled in, and I camped overnight by myself, and I recorded myself reading the entire Poet and the Sage, because this was
Wow.
when I was thinking like, cool, I want to record this by the campfire. Now I have no doubt that one day somebody's going to find this recording, and they're going to be like, this is psychopathic. Here's a guy in the middle of the woods reading a book with intervals of me being like, what the hell is that sound? You know, like, because I'm by this campfire and like there's a rustle over there, or there's something happening in the trees over here, you know, and I'm just talking into the microphone, just being like, well, here I am, you know, in the middle of the woods reading this book by a campfire, and there's horrifying sounds over there. And the thing is, about 2 weeks prior to that, oh, you'll like this. We went camping in that spot again, and for one of the first times, and it's this great little spot that Jen and I found right in the middle of the woods where nobody goes, because there's like a fire trail that then just goes to a dead end, so nobody goes there. But one morning we wake up, and this car is coming down we're horrified, you know, because we're like, oh, you know, nobody knows we're here, and it's like, you know, you don't want a random vehicle coming to the middle of the woods to meet you where you've been camping overnight. And it turned out that this guy was like a fern forager, and you know, he had a little crop of ferns where we were camping, and so he's coming down there to check on his crop. He had like a local like a plant store. I know that there's a word for that, nursery, that's it. So anyway, he gets talking to us. Get this, right? He tells us this story of when he was up in Gympie, about an hour and a half from where we were. That's actually about 45 minutes. And he was on this farm doing some work with some plants, and he went down to this river. And he said that in the sandbank on the river were these fresh footprints, right?
Hmm.
And he's like, let me go down and check these footprints. And he showed us a picture of these footprints, man. They're like short, really fat, really weird footprints. You wouldn't look at them and think that's a human being, but they had like humanoid tendencies, right?
Yeah.
And he said it just comes out of the water and then back into the water, right?
Huh.
And so he's got this picture of these really weird footprints that were there, like fresh in the sand, as he went down to this really remote farm about 45 minutes from there. Now, get this. He then goes and he said he's talking to this Aboriginal guy who has a nursery up around that area too.
Mm-hmm.
And he's telling this guy, you know, I got this picture. Take a look at this. You know, look at these weird footprints. It's so strange. And you know, he's telling him this story, and this Aboriginal guy kind of looks up to the sky, looks as if he's getting his bearings. You know? And he goes, yeah, that's where they are. You know.
All right.
Yeah. And then apparently this Aboriginal guy said, you know, yeah, like he pulled him up later on. He wasn't sure if he wanted to say it immediately, but he said, you know, yeah, my grandparents have seen those things, you know, those creatures. And so I'm thinking about this as I'm in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night. So I think one day people are going to find that recording and they'll be like, this guy's a psychopath. I can't believe that we listened to his podcast for so long without catching this.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think I've ever been in the woods and really had that strange of an experience. Because you know, I've camped out in the desert and some pretty deep woods, and I've never. I think I heard a bear once, but that was probably about it. You know, coyotes, but never.
Yeah, but see,
never anything that like you know.
I heard a bear once. It's like, you know, people get really, and here's the thing: you might not have those experiences because you're not crazy like me. Like I walk into a dark room, I'm like, what the hell's in this room? You know, like my imagination runs wild. I will make up the most insane creatures in my mind that could be there. But
so you don't read like horror novels, do you? It's probably not good for you.
I love horror movies though. I love horror movies, right? Because I really get into it. You know, I get scared. I get so scared. But like you Americans are so weird. And here's why. You're always like, yeah, I'm gonna accuse you right now. All right. Americans are always like, oh, Australia, you know, these venomous snakes and bugs, and you know, you guys have got these dangerous animals over there. I'm like, go camping in America, you can literally get mauled by a bear or a coyote, but like something that's going to come and rip your face off, you know. And it's like, I don't get the fear, whereas like camping in America seems so much more dangerous to me.
On the West Coast it is. In the Rockies it is, because you have things that are several times larger than you that will hunt you over there. Yeah. Over here on the East Coast, a black bear will hunt you if they're hungry, but you know, cougar, they'll hunt you, but the thing is they stalk. And as long as you're, you know, aware of your surroundings, it's usually not a big deal. Because a black bear, I mean, generally you could scare a black bear off just by shouting at it. You could scare a mountain lion off just by shouting at it. A venomous snake, however, you get bit once and you're done. You know, if you don't get to help in time, you're out in the middle of the wilderness.
You're right.
I would consider that scarier here, at least. I know over there you guys are probably more used to it, and so you probably don't take as big of risks because of that. Here, we don't really have as much of a problem with spiders and snakes. I mean, here in the Southeast, and I think just in the U.S. in general, I think there's only 2 really poisonous spiders that you have to watch out for, which are brown recluse and the black widow. Besides that, you know, we have snakes in the bottoms here, but unless you're in those places around water, you don't have to worry about it. Yeah. So like, as far as
the idea
goes,
that you're kind of taking a chance that the black bear had breakfast that day, you know, it's like, you're like, okay, as long as all of these animals are well fed, I'm gonna be fine. Or as long as I'm paying close attention, it's like it's just
That's how
listen.
I
I
feel
get it.
walking into a church.
It's
As
it's
long as
just
they're all well fed, they won't jump on me.
I love that analogy. Actually, okay. On that note, I have to tell you something. Right? I think you're gonna think this is really cool. Um, so I don't know if I told you, but I really want to be reading my poetry and playing my music in like
Mhm.
sacred spaces, like cathedrals and churches and stuff
Right.
like that. It seems most natural to me. I love the architecture, and I want to be playing in beautiful spaces. And next month, it looks as though I'm going to be. This is really cool. I've been talking with the musical director of St. Stephen's Cathedral down in Brisbane, about an hour from me,
Oh
and
yeah.
he's going to be accompanying me on organ as I read poetry for one of their Lent concerts. So I'm going to be reading poetry, and then he's going to play a piece, and then I'll read some more and he'll play a piece, and so this is going to be my first, like, I'm not a Catholic, I consider myself, probably like a biological and cultural Christian, but hey, a Stoic
Yeah.
reading poetry, in a cathedral accompanied by organ. Like, I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Oh my goodness, I'm looking at it right now. Wow. That is that's a big one.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
it's pretty good. But Brisbane doesn't have too many amazing cathedrals. Like, we just got back from Melbourne, man, and if you go to Melbourne and you walk around Melbourne, uh,
Right.
everywhere you look, there is stunning architecture, with deep symbolism. And they've got, so many cathedrals in that city. You walk around, you can't walk a few blocks without seeing a giant cathedral. And you walk into them and you just think, you don't know what to make of it. It's
Yeah.
that people spent this time and this energy making something so unbelievably rich and beautiful. Yeah, it's almost too much.
It I'm looking at they do light shows sometimes on the outside of it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Where they'll project like images onto the cathedral. That's I've never seen anything like that. That's great.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And just look, the musical director there, his name's Chris Trickolas, I believe, but I'm probably getting that last name wrong. But he's a really wise young guy who he's really open to bringing new experiences to the cathedral.
Mhm.
And this is something that Peterson talks about a lot as well. That he said something the other day that made me really think, because he said that the church needs to reincorporate an element of the Dionysian into these spaces, so
They
that
do.
it's not just a dogmatic, you go there and you listen to a sermon and you hear some music, and no,
Right.
people need to have the experience of coming into a deeper relationship with the divine. And I know I'm so ignorant and I don't go to the services, so what do I know? That's fact. But what I really want to do when I bring in the poetry, and there's two things I really want to do in a cathedral after the poetry. I really want to play the didgeridoo in a cathedral, because I think that's going to sound incredible and it's such a sacred instrument. But I also want to get like 100+ trumpeters or horn players in a cathedral, because in the Old Testament,
It's a
when
lot.
they sanctify a temple, they bring
Yeah.
in all the horn players, and they're lifting those sounds to heaven. And you just think, could you imagine the experience of standing in a giant cathedral with a
Yeah, you'd
hundred
have to be
horn
there. No
players?
recording would ever do it justice. You would have to
No
be there for
recording.
it. You'd have to
You would
feel it.
have
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my long-term aspirations, but I'll start with
Well,
poetry.
it's wild to me that the Christian faith has moved so far away from that, because if you look at most Eastern religious traditions, like look at the Sikhs. For the Sikh, their kind of sacred temple is a place where everybody can go into. It literally feeds the poor. And churches don't really do that as much as they used to. People go out. Congregations will go, and members will go and be, they'll help at soup kitchens. They'll help organize things. But as far as bringing them into their beautiful church, You know, they spend a lot of money on making sure those carpets look nice, and they're not as happy about bringing people into it. And I think doesn't really do it doesn't really do anybody justice. It's just stuff. It's just stuff, and it definitely goes against the gospel. But I think that's I don't know if it's like that otherwise. But it's like that here in America. America's pretty bad about uh I don't know. Just Americans like to do everything up. Everything has to be big, more and big and extra. I don't know. I think Australians have a very similar kind of. I think as far as with the other Commonwealth countries, I think that Americans and Australians are pretty close. I think we're closer in temperament and uh, than we are to the Canadians usually, which is weird. It's weird to think, but I don't know. We have a relatively similar climate for most of America as you do in Australia, and I think that kind of helps change how people think, but also like I think the Canadians want to not seem American, so they try as much not to as they can.
Yeah, that's clear. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, Australians feel kind of like it kind of feels like if you took a bunch of Texans and you put them next to Indonesia and say, saw what happened. It's a fun experiment. I like it. I like I don't think I've ever met an Australian I didn't get a kick out of. Just always just fun. Something
Australians
about
are good
it. I don't
people.
know.
Yeah, they're generally just, well, they're always happy to meet somebody from abroad, so that's the first thing. I think that Australians and Americans generally have somewhat of a kinship between them. Now my wife would argue that perhaps Australians have a little bit more of a negative view of Americans than Americans do of Australians, and
it's probably everybody abroad from America probably has a negative view of America.
You might be touching on some truth there. I won't expand on that, but what it's funny because I spoke to. Here's a cool thing for you. You like Joseph Siracusa, and I adore him. And in Melbourne, I actually got to meet him for the first time.
Yeah, you mentioned that one together, of your emails. Yeah.
So, I've never had a cigar before, and so I thought, hey, when in Rome, if you're going to be meeting Joseph Siracusa, you have a cigar with the guy, because that's usually how I pay him for interviews. I'll buy him a box, and
well, I mean, were they genuine Cubans? Did he break into his?
Yeah, man. He's classic. He's such a classic. I love him. He says, I said, like, where do you want to meet? He said, okay, you got to go to the Hyatt, the Grand Hyatt in town, and they've got a great little cigar store. He walks into this cigar store. There's this glass room where you can go in and they have to unlock it for you. So he goes in, let me in. We're gonna go get get some cigars, So
yeah,
he's just I love him. He's got such class, he just walks in, he's got his suit on, let me in, let's go, let's get some cigars here. And he takes me in, we get the Romeo your Juliet, and just, I did a terrible job smoking that. It was not good.
I kicked your ass, didn't it?
But yeah, to my point, I asked him, I said, what advice have you got for somebody, like a theology student, podcaster, kind of heading over to America, that sort of thing. And he said what everybody says, which is Americans love the accent. It's going to be a huge asset for you. And, you'll fit in there. You'll do well. My brother, his accent to him is his biggest asset. He said, like,
it is.
He never wants to lose his accent, So there's a kinship there. People like Australians in America.
Oh, they do. And Americans love a good accent. They really do.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody kind of likes to make fun of American accents. It's something that everybody thinks they can do and they like to try. And I've seen videos from everywhere on it.
We surely do.
Oh, the Australian accent is a good English accent, not the Cockney kind of, oh yeah, like, no, they don't like, Americans don't like that as much. It's just that fluid, posh kind of, American women specifically will die for for foreign accents,
Yeah.
for specifically European ancestry with accents. Not as much from other places. Uh, Americans are, on the whole, not the biggest fan of brown people, unfortunately. That's kind of that's been a problem for a good long while here, and it seems like it's getting worse recently, which I don't understand. But hey,
How do you reckon it's
somebody's
getting
got to make a
worse?
buck.
Talk to me about that.
Oh man, that's a can of worms. Um, I think that we've had a really big history of civil rights in this country that is unique, a very unique climate to America, nowhere else. In other places, we'll try to inherit, you know, culture from that, but they don't have the same history we do. And we had the big civil rights movement in the 60s, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and a lot of others. And it did not it didn't take root as quickly as it should have. And a lot of people, it took a while to kind of get us out of that kind of thinking in a lot of ways. School wise, when I was in the 90s, when I was in school, it was probably kind of a golden age for us. Um, I went specifically to a magnet school when I was in elementary school, and it was probably about 50% Black kids. And that it gave me a frame of reference where I thought that was a normal mix here in this country. And it is not average. It's not an average mix. And it wasn't until I moved away from Memphis, which Memphis, I lived in a suburb with, it was very, very cosmopolitan. There were all sorts of people. My best friend was from Iran, and I like on my bus alone to school, I'd say it was probably about 45% white kids, just white, normal Southern and suburban kids, but the rest were from everywhere, like maybe we'd go over to Van's house one night and have Vietnamese food, or we would go over to, my buddy Cena's and have like lamb that his mom would cook. It's fantastic. It took me leaving to realize that that's not a normal thing in this country. That is not how it always is. And I was very, very lucky to grow up in an area like that, because moving over here to the mountains, it it's segregated still. In fact, it's probably more segregated now than it was in the 90s. And that's hard to think about, that we're not moving in the right direction with that. And so even though there have been a lot of movements recently that have highlighted what's going on with this, I think that there's still a lot of families that are disenfranchised. And the thing is, I see it every day. I work with people who are, you know, all from Mexico and Guatemala, and the back of house for the restaurant, and then the front of house is all white, all white servers that can talk to tables. There's not crossover. They don't really choose to know each other. I used to think it was a kind of that the servers didn't want, they, a lot of them, they don't know every single cook's name. Or I used to think it was on them, and then I learned, well, cooks don't really want to know most of the white people's names either, because there's just this divide there, and it has to do with language and culture, and there's not much of a desire to bridge that gap. And I think that's what I've tried to do, which I've been learning. My Spanish is better now than it ever has been, and it's because I use it every day, and I practice every day. And like I had to go back like a child. I had to humble myself and realize, oh, I need to be learning ABCs and head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Like I need to act like I'm learning like a child, and I did. And something clicked in my brain, and now um, I'm moving more and more towards being fluent, towards being bilingual, and it's incredible because I can connect. I can actually connect with these people. And it's not just about like translating. It's not about the job. It's about it's about the purpose of being able to really truly connect with another person. Is I don't know, it's incredible. There's nothing quite like connecting to other people,
Mm.
because every relationship you have with another person, each person is unique. And every relationship that you foster with that other person is unique. Your your relationship to a person and my relationship to the same person are completely different, even if they're from a similar kind of place. And that's different from the relationship of all three of us being together. Like it always changes. And so when you can't effectively communicate with the people around you that you see every day, how do you make those connections? How do you grow together as people? And I think about that, I think every single day. It's very, very important to me as a person that I be able to communicate. That was one of the first things I learned in Spanish about why I was learning Spanish. Is I wanted to tell them, because I want to communicate with you. I want communication because we work together. We're together every day. We're right next to each other. And it's I don't know. I was talking about them, or talking to them the other day, and I've been toying with the notion of teaching English and math to kids in Guatemala, where a lot of the, mis compas are from. And I think it would be incredible. I think it would be as a sabbatical from school between like a bachelor's and something else. I think that would be a incredible opportunity, because instead of a European sabbatical where you go and spend money, you could. I don't care about making money. I care about enriching myself and incorporating myself with the people around me. And I think there's a lot of work to be done, specifically in Central America. And I would like to do that. I think it's not because it's a noble pursuit, but because after the stories I've heard, I would like to see where some of these people grew up. I would like to understand their culture on a more personal level. I would like to experience it and help in the ways that I can, that I'm able to do, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like this is such an important lesson. I mean, for me personally to take away, but you think about, okay, let's take a look at what you're doing here. You're recognizing that there are certain racial and cultural divides that are happening within your current within the bounds of your culture that you're in right now. And what I didn't hear you say is it's their fault. It's their fault. It's the government's fault. It's, the people's fault. No, you said, so I started learning Spanish.
Yeah.
Like that, to me, that is so awesome to think about this idea that like clearly there's a whole bunch of problems that people are having out there. But, you look at this Stoic kind of doctrine of, well, okay, take a look at human beings. What are they? Well, they're social beings at their core. What does that mean about how we should interact with them? Well, perhaps that means that, like you say, we want to deepen our relationships with people and be able to understand the people around us on a deeper level, and to have a better relationship with everybody with whom we work or with whom we interact. And of course, we don't all have the time and energy to learn everything about all the cultures that we're going to come into contact with. But what you've said is, okay, well, in my workplace, that you've got the Hispanics out here and you've got the white people out here, and they're not really talking to each other. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take it upon myself to be
Yeah.
the bridge between them. And that, it's like you don't see anybody doing that. Like there's so much finger pointing, there's so much blaming,
Right.
but you want to
Because
see
I mean,
people doing this.
and that's the thing is, a lot of people are like, well, why should I change? Why should I learn Spanish? They're in our country. We speak English here. And it's not my problem if they can't understand their job, and it's not their problem, you know, that's, it's not required that they do so, but it's human decency. It's being a decent person. Um, for lack of a better term, it's virtuous, to actually care about people. That's something, if you were to look at Socrates said that, in, I think, Xenophon's Symposium. He said something along the lines of, I can't recall a time when I haven't been in love with someone. And what he means by in love with is not, I don't think, like a sexual love. I think it's like the platonic ideal of love, where it's just caring so deeply for the people around you that no matter who they are, everybody deserves a chance to learn and to be a part of your life. At least starting out. Sometimes you have to limit that after a while, but like you should give people the benefit of the doubt. And it's not up to someone else to bridge the gap for you. You have to bridge the gap. It's you. Because you're, why expect anybody else to do anything for you? That's such a weird byproduct of the industrial society, of the kind of Ford manufacturing method of specialization. You specialize each little part, and we can create something larger with that. But at the same time, we do the same things to ourselves. When you get a doctorate, you have a very, very, very specific set of knowledge about a very specific thing. And you might have other knowledge besides that, but we're pushed into this way of thinking instead of, we should all, in a sense, be a jack of all trades in a certain way. And at least when it comes to people, there is no specialization, I think, that really needs to occur with people. It's, you have a unique relationship with every person, and you should foster that. I struggle with distance. If I don't see a person regularly, it's hard for me to try to keep up with them, and that's something I'm trying to get better about. Maybe I need to go through some sort of a 12-step program to get better about keeping up with relationships. And it's hard. It's hard nowadays, even if you have the infinite ability to keep track of everybody. That doesn't mean that your mind has the ability to keep track of so many people in your life.
Yeah.
But I think if you're one who loves wisdom, if you're a philosopher, one who loves wisdom, you should want to love people as well. People are kind of the whole point of the conscious world. Because we're not talking about nurturing our animal selves. We're talking about nurturing our cognition, our consciousness, about nurturing what makes us people. Which, on that note, did you have any notes prepared for today, or should we just throw them away?
I have absolutely no notes prepared for today. Though there were a few directions that I thought we might go, but honestly, let's keep on going where we're going. This is great.
Of course.
This is good stuff, man. No, I'm just it's just talking about how wisdom calls you perhaps to a love of the human race and just individual relationships. I'm just thinking about how this is absolutely no like sneaky advertisement of my services, but in my mentoring practice,
Simon's mentoring practice. Here he is, Simon J.E. Drew, coming in. What do you got to say to us, Simon?
Well, here's the thing. see, over the past few years, what I've noticed, because I'm trying to learn how to be a better mentor or a better coach all the time. Because I think that, you start from first principles. It's like, okay, well, if what's happening here is people are coming to me and saying, I want to spend time with you because I think it will be somewhat therapeutic or profitable for me, then okay, what does that mean about how I should approach this? And what I've noticed is that the way that I mentor people is extremely flexible, because I'm trying to take into account exactly what you're saying. I might put it in a different way, but you know, every individual has a unique experience in life, has different things that they would want to get out of a relationship with somebody like me. And so with some people, they come to the session and they might be like the CEO of a business, and what they want to do is they want to work through some problems that they're dealing with in their company. And I'm not telling them how to run their company, but I'm just asking them questions. And if that's what we do, and if at the end of the session they feel as though they've had a chance to further clarify their own thoughts, and it's like, okay, I'll give you that.
Right.
That's what I'll do, because that's what we're doing here. That's what you want out of this. And for some people, it'll be much more personal, internal issues that they're dealing with. Some people will be dealing with family or their careers, but the thing about it is, I always find that if you just drop this idea of I'm here to mentor you, I'm here to coach you. No, I'm here to be another human being on the other end of this conversation. And let's just talk about whatever it is that is coming to you right now that you feel
Right.
most appropriately you want to dive into. And it's in that process that you start to build such meaningful relationships with people, and you learn so much, because everybody is like infinitely better than I am at least one, two, or three things, And so you can start asking them questions about that, and you can start learning. And it's like, I think that what we're trying to do in the walled garden is to expand that experience of people coming
Right.
together, and just, we all have shared values. Okay, we're seeking deeper wisdom in our life, we want to come into a closer, we want to cultivate more virtue in our lives. Okay, we start with those kind of first core principles, core values. But what I'm really interested in is seeing like what happened. And this is what Sharon said, right? She said, like, I'm interested in seeing if this thing, the internet, can actually be used to foster deep, meaningful relationships with people, you know? Because I think that in many ways that's still somewhat of an open question, because there's something about being there in person, right? But we want to see, like, if you bring people together and everybody's got their unique shared experience in life, or they've got their unique experience that they're having. But if we all share these common values, let's see what magic happens when we start talking, when we
Right.
start sharing with each other.
As long as it doesn't turn into an echo chamber. That's the scariest thing,
Oh, yeah.
is everybody feeling the same way about too many things. You got to have somebody in there to shake it up, at least, or at least everybody can shake it up with each other. Those disagreements are, we're made to disagree. We are. It's compelling.
Yeah.
And I that's what keeps me, I think, out of it. I don't really join any one group, or you had Stoic Dan on the other day, and when just in the introduction, Stoic Dan, I was like, I wouldn't do that. And I don't mean that to be down on him for his choice of how he chooses to label himself, but I wouldn't label myself like that. I don't. I feel like I've never really liked labels. Um, I'm a person, and I'm me. I do what I do, and I say what I say, and that's as far as that goes. As far as what I believe, you know, You have to kind of suss it out when we talk about it. It's not anything I'm going to put out there in a bio for somebody to just, I don't agree with that, because that's a good way for people to either latch on to me because there's some sort of I want the connection to be genuine. I don't want it to be based on labels. I don't want it to be based on somebody hates me, not because of anything I said, but because of something I represent to them. I don't want that. I want to represent myself solely.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think you're touching on the exact reason why from the start of this project, I've said to everybody, this is not a specifically Stoic pursuit.
Exactly.
Now, we all come to this saying, virtue, heck yeah. Wisdom,
yeah.
heck yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Perhaps imitating the divine, let's at least figure out what that would mean. Like we come to it with these certain questions and these certain values to start off with. But it's like, what if wisdom carries us in the direction of, what if wisdom carries me in the direction of Christianity? And I'm like, no, I think this is the answer. And it carries somebody over to, cynicism. And they say, well, this is the answer. I want people. Let me tell you what Sharon told me the other day. I love this. I was talking to her on my way to pick up Jen from the airport when she was getting back from America. And we were talking about, what is it that we're doing in the Walled Garden? Is it education? Are we trying to educate people? Are we trying to bring them along on an adventure? To me, it seemed like what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring people along on the adventure of at least trying to honestly seek after wisdom and to cultivate virtue. Honestly, not just mouthing the words and saying, I'm a Stoic and I love virtue and I love wisdom, and then you go off into your life and you're just like everybody else, and nobody can really tell anything different about you, based on your spoken words. But no, like, let's take a look at that verse in the Bible, for example. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally, and let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave upon the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. What that line does for me is it says, perhaps we don't even know what it would mean to truly ask for wisdom, because we think that we do. I'm practicing philosophy. Are you really? And so, what Sharon said to me makes so much sense. She said, I don't know if what we're doing is education. I see it as provocation. And I thought, thank you, Sharon. We're trying to provoke people into a state of, oh, okay, I'm a little bit more awake now. I'm a little bit more here now. I'm a little bit more committed to the path. Yeah, I can see that there's a destination. I can see that this is important, to be awake and alive and to take life with a certain degree of seriousness. And that's what Sharon does for me, man. Like, she provokes me all the time. I can't have a conversation with Sharon or listen to Sharon without feeling stirred in my soul to become better,
She, I don't think I've had a time where I've listened to her and I didn't feel something.
Feel something. That is so important. Feel something, right?
Right. It's funny you say that, though, because I think I have a book here on I gotta find the I'll do it later. It's just a quote. It's a quote in a book, and
just a futile little maxim, as Seneca
it's
would
just
say.
it's just something a little. Okay, here we go. So this is a book on Diogenes of Sinope that I've been reading. My birthday was a couple weeks ago, as you know. And
happy birthday, by the way.
Oh,
I hope
thank
you had an
you.
amazing
I appreciate
day, man.
that.
Yeah.
It was I worked. I worked, and that was fine.
Classic.
That's life. That's how life goes. But my English teacher last week, as I was walking out of class, he just gave me a book, and it happened to be this. And I was like, how did you know? And he goes, oh, come on. Like, of any people that would want to read more about Diogenes. I was like, ah, that's true. So he really didn't like Plato, but one of the things that he said was that only those teachings of philosophers that can awaken people into action, and that like sweet sour unguents can irritate human wounds, are worth anything. The rest is empty talk and useless games played by philosophers whose only preoccupation is to hide their spiritual emptiness and obfuscation under a mantle of meaningless words.
Oh,
It's true.
man. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
true. Which I would like to get more into Diogenes in a second, but
Let's
that
do
is
it.
the point. That's the point, though. That's the entire point. Is it's not about I don't think it'll ever really be about these what's the word? These dogmatic kind of views of, you know, there could be 4 virtues, there could be 20 virtues. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. These are just words that we're assigning to things. These are new words we're creating to further go down these rabbit holes, and I think it obfuscates us from the real meaning. The real meaning is to get people on board. It's to actually inspire the people around us into action, because what is theory but not for practice? That's a very big kind of thing that Epictetus was known for, was which he learned from Musonius Rufus, who definitely had a lot from I think Crates was one of the ones that Crates the Cynic, who was that was kind of the whole point. Was it's the Cynics didn't really write anything down, because why? It's not about writing all of these things. I mean, people would record what they would say, but they weren't going to write that down themselves, because that's not what their example is. Their example is to just do things. It's not to write about it. It's about showing people. And each situation is different. It's about having the background knowledge so that you know how to act in the moment, not that so that you know how to say the right things.
Yeah.
That's what the sophists did. That was the point. And so I think Diogenes was probably the best person to look at for that, because he wasn't the first Cynic. I think that was Antisthenes, who learned from Socrates directly, and then started his own school of Cynicism, which Cynis comes from kainos or kainos, I don't know Greek, which means dog. It's the philosophy of the dog. And Diogenes was a dog. That's how he referred to himself. It's how people referred to him. He would bark at people in the town square. He would just, he would chase people around and bark at them if he didn't like what they did.
Hardcore provocation.
Oh, he was the best provocator.
Yeah.
In fact, I personally love. Oh, he had a lot of problems with Plato, because Plato was no better than the sophist that he would accuse other people of being. He would go so far as to change who Socrates was in his writings. So if you look at the beginning of when he would write about Socrates and his apologies and stuff like that, versus how Xenophon would write it, they were similar. But then late stage Plato, when he's writing the Republic, completely different Socrates. Socrates didn't change, Plato did. And Diogenes really, 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 really did not like how Plato would act, because it was I don't know, it's hilarious, I think, because Plato was probably the biggest name at the time after the death of Socrates, when he really started taking on the mantle himself. Xenophon was popular too, but nobody talks about Xenophon anymore, and yet in secondary schools we still teach the Republic. Like, that's a required reading a lot of time here in the United States, is the Republic. And Diogenes, I think one of my favorite ones that I found is, this is kind of a diatribe. I don't know. There's a couple of sources on it. I don't know how accurate it is, but he said, or once he asked Plato for wine and dried figs, upon which Plato sent him a whole jar of wine. So he says, "Hey, can I have like some wine?" Like he's like, "Can I have a cup of wine?" Like it's probably a situation where it calls for it, where like other people have things too. And Plato's response was to give him a whole jar of wine, which is saying, it's like, "Hey, can I have a glass of wine?" It's like, "Here, have an entire bottle." Person who lives in a bathtub who's less fortunate than me, here you go, because I'm a great person, and that's. And so what he replied with was, "If someone asks you how many two and two make, would you answer 20? So it seems you neither give what you are asked nor answer as you were questioned."
Oh,
And kind of from
fun
then
guy to
on,
have at
he
a
just,
party.
oh yeah, awesome, awesome, because
Yeah.
that's it, it was for him. It was all about action and not, because he saw it for what it was. He saw that the act was not. He's like, "Hey, can I have a cup of wine?" And he's like, "Here, have all of this wine because you're." The implication was that you're less fortunate. I'm Plato, you're Diogenes. Here you go. I'm giving this to you. And he's like, "You're a piece of shit." Like he called him out for it because that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, which honestly, I do recommend this book. It's great, great, great read because I've never seen so many sources after each chapter. Like each chapter is followed by like 70 different sources. It's insane.
Yeah.
Um, it's just
And
my favorite quote though.
can I
Favorite
just
quote.
say,
Yeah, go ahead.
what's so cool is that you have a teacher who got to know you and thought Joe would love this book.
He
Got you
knew.
that book.
He knew. He knew. Well, no, I think he already had this book, which is
Yeah.
why it was just
But even
something
so, it's
he had in
like
his library. Exactly.
it's like how many of us take the time, like if we're a teacher or it's like how many of us take the time to think, you know what? This student needs this. I think Sharon does that to me all the time. Kai does that as well. But, Sharon does it with her words. She knows the adventure that I'm trying to go on probably better than what I do. And so she will, she'll see little words or sentences that she knows, like,
Right.
he needs to hear this, and man, that's a great teacher. Anyway, go
It
on.
is.
What's this quote you got?
Oh, it was it's just this little ditty, just this little he someone once called him a madman. He replied, "I'm not mad. It's only that my head is different from yours." That's it. I mean, what better perspective to have than that? Like honestly.
Did
He
you ever hear the
he
one?
stirred it up.
Sorry, go on.
No, he stirred it up. And what you learn if you really dive into who he was as a person, you learn why the Stoics chose to emulate the Cynics, why Zeno lived with Crates and then created the Stoic school. Because he lived and studied under multiple philosophers. And to study with another philosopher, to learn the philosophy, you live with them. We don't do that anymore. We should. And I think it's because now it's about academics and it's not about, I think one of the greatest examples I've ever gotten, my grandfather died on July 4th, which is, our Independence Day. Big deal. My grandfather died 2019, Independence Day. And, we went to the funeral that weekend. And one of his former students, who was, probably in his 60s at the time, tells one of the most incredible stories I had never heard. Like all of them, all of the people that would speak would tell stories I had never heard before. Because it was between them and my grandfather. It wasn't had nothing to do with anybody else. It's not like he was going to talk about it. It was him and another student. They were both very, very bright. And my grandfather was a math professor. They were math students. And there was supposed to be this thing that they wanted to go to, but they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford bus fare or being put up to do it. And he just goes, "I have a clear weekend. I'll drive you." And he did. and he took them. And he
Mm.
did that kind of thing all the time. He said, this person needs this and I can provide it. I'm going to do it. And he did for a lot of people. And the same as my English professor the other day giving me this book, knowing, like he even put a little inscription in it, said, what is natural is always a matter of perspective. Maybe if we acted more like dogs, the world would be a kinder place. You know, he knew exactly, because he cared to. He knew that I cared to get to know him, and that, you know, he would care as long as somebody else cares, he's going to care. And that's, it's such a great example for how to live. If somebody else is going to, it'll stick with you. If somebody really, you know, somebody has the ability to help you and they say, I will do that. That's what Diogenes did in his weird way of,
Mm.
he would walk around in the marketplace with a lantern looking for a man, and on, you know, like a real person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In the
He's like,
daytime.
somebody,
Yeah.
yeah. So does somebody know, you know, where can I find a real person? Show me. And he did that not because he was a crazy person, but because he was very deliberate in what he did. He wanted to rouse people. He didn't care if people loved or hated him. He loved them. He didn't like them, but he loved them. And just like any parent, he was going to try to teach them, not out of obligation, but because he truly loved them. And his form of teaching was different because he felt that that's what they needed. They got all other sorts of teaching. Now he needed to be some sort of counterbalance.
Mm.
He lived a life of purpose because of that. It was a choice. Everything he did, he chose to do. And it's not just about, you know, being an ascetic and, you know, like living in a bathtub. It's about, as long as you care about people, you're going to emulate that. If you truly care about people, you know, being a good parent isn't giving your child everything they want. It's doing what you think is best, because nobody can know what you think is best besides you, and you should always act on that. That's very, very central to, I think, all of philosophy, is acting with complete trust in your own opinion, you know?
Mm. Yeah, complete. Okay, there's so much there, man. Firstly, that idea of complete trust in your own opinion. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said that, something along the lines of, every true genius believes that what they think is the truth for everyone. You know what I mean? Like, it's like there's almost this crazy trust that you receive in,
Right.
and I think that there's there's a certain point where I watch somebody, and if I consider myself any judge of a person's soul, I will give them my full adoration, even if they seem to others to be arrogant by saying, well, this is what, like people like Fran Lebowitz, for example, beautiful New York writer. She is a stunning human being. I disagree with her on many things, but she has a great soul. And one thing that she says is that when it comes to her writing, she always assumes that she's right. I get it. I get it. She's a brilliant thinker, and I get it. I get why she does that. You might look at somebody like Bukowski. You know, he's this rough character, crazy guy. You know, had a terrible upbringing, and some of his poetry is so dark. But no matter how much, quote unquote, arrogance you might see in the man, or vice you might see in the man, he's a genius, and you should read his
Yeah,
stuff, and you should learn
of
from him.
course.
You know, like, and I love this idea that you give of that you're talking about of Diogenes. See, I've never seen the cynics like this, but you're opening me up to this idea that Diogenes almost saw himself as a counterbalance. And I wonder if I can read you something. Do you mind if I read you something?
Oh, please do. I've been reading things.
Yeah, cool. Well, I want to find this. It's uh here we go. So there's a document I'm getting up on my computer now. It's called The Ladders to God, the Poetic Mandalas. And this is a series of 12 what I call poetic mandalas that I wrote while I was listening to Paradisa Suite over and over again. So I basically listened to it all the way through, and by the end I'd have about 12 verses of one part. And so it's kind
Mm.
of this very strange mystical collection of weird poetry that deals with, you might say, the nature of the sage as it relates to perhaps politics, the spirit of the age, how one, and when you say that he's acting as a counterbalance, see, you're so right that like we get so bogged down in the dogma that it puts these walls around us where it's like, well, this is how you're supposed to act. Well, the sage might see that there needs to be a counterbalance. And so they might go outside of the dogma of Stoicism or Christianity or Islam or, cynicism, whatever it is, whatever philosophy or religion, and they might act as that counterbalance. And I want to find something in here because I think it was, when I write often this sort of stuff, it takes me, I don't think I fully understand a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with in here yet. But let me just find something here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, here we go. I'll read this one. This is part 6 of it, but I think that there's some stuff in here that comes along with this. So when a mighty tree has fallen, young growth races to the sky, and so death gives way to life. When a tree has been cut at the base, new branches emerge from the stump, so the tree finds a path to eternity. When the masses have corrupted the youth, the wise among them encourage the youth who are uncorrupted to strive for great heights. The sage has striven and now shines a light from above. When the masses have lost the way, the wise among them return to the rituals of their ancestors. The sage finds the diamonds among the stones. When the masses believe that they know, they will not be corrected. When the masses die by their pride, the wise among them seek counsel from the sage, who guideth all who would return to the straight path. When the masses do more, the wise among them do less, so as to maintain the universal harmony. The sage does what is necessary, and that is why he is the sage. When the masses do less, the wise among them do more, so as to maintain the straight path of eternity. The sage does what is required, and in such a manner he embodies the universal logos. When the masses curse God, the wise among them search for him. When the masses praise God, the wise among them question him. Everything done by the sage is a praise and a prayer to God. When the masses eat cake, the wise among them eat bread. When the masses have only bread to eat, the wise among them eat crumbs. The sage only eats what is needed for nourishment, and for him there is always enough. Not all philosophers are sages, yet all sages are philosophers. The masses pursue that which is here today and gone tomorrow. The wise among them pursue that which is common among all things perceived. The sage seeks those things which are common among that which is perceived and that which is not yet perceived. By seeking such things, the sage comes into alignment with the universal way. Give thine attention to the wise words of Seneca, the great philosopher who guided many generations with his moral letters. A great caretaker was he, for while the masses slaughtered their own in the games of Rome, he shone a light of truth for all to see after him. So what I think part of the idea that's coming out, especially in the middle of that poetic mandala, is this idea that when the masses are pushing in this direction, the wise among them are going to push in the other direction. The sage is always looking to keep that balance, that balance among the people. And it seems like what you're saying about Diogenes the Cynic is that he was almost a person who was aiming not at any dogma, but sagehood. And he was trying to maintain a certain balance by being a counteraction to what he saw, what people needed in that time. I don't know. Am I hitting on something there?
Yeah. So the structure for society as it was and as it is constructed, wholly constructed by us. We construct it in our minds. We create, these histories, and that's something that he saw. He saw it as an outsider. He chose to see it as an outsider. And he chose to show other people that it's like he showed them the walls that they had built around them by kicking them, like trying to get people to come out of their houses by just knocking on their doors whenever he can. That's, I think, his real, because he sought to be only who he was, nothing more. And the only point of philosophy to him was to show other people how to be them, not how to be what they were told to be or what they had constructed, but to just exist. And it's funny, it seems in most threads of philosophy, we come to, or at least ancient philosophy, we come to this kind of realization that I've been reading a little bit of Epicurus, and I've been reading about Diogenes, and I've read a bit about the Tao from China. And what seems to be present in every kind of ancient style philosophy is this, it's using cognition to deny cognition. It's the idea is to be more like the animals that we watch, to revoke the thinking part and try to just flow,
To return to the garden.
That is the everlasting kind of, for most philosophies, that is the answer. And I don't know if it's the whole picture, but I think it's a start in a lot of ways, because I like the concept that's presented in the Tao, the ideas of Wu Wei, the way, like the eternal way, the method of doing it. And it's to just don't go against the grain. That's it. Go with the grain. I think there's I think that's what the word Li I think it has multiple reasons or meanings in the Tao, but one of them is like the sinew in a muscle, or like the striations in jade. It's this natural kind of, these natural folds, and it's saying to go with that grain. We force ourselves kind of to go against the grain for the sake of society, for what we build it to be. The issue I see, though, is that once that cat's out of the bag, I don't know how to put it back in. Even though we try to find these little pockets of just solely existing, the Buddhists have an entire method of meditation and chants and a life of service, all built to finding that enlightenment and being able to just sit and be. And it's not about thinking that you're being, it's about just being. And yet we can't avoid the fact that once you ring a bell, you can't unring it. And that exists with our cognition. We're builders. That's what people are. We're builders. We mimic what we see in the world, and we build. We create meaning. That's the number one thing we do, is we create meaning. Whether there is meaning or not in anything intrinsically, we can't know. So we create it. And that's fine. I think what a lot of the philosophers call us to do is to just stop thinking and just do, that flow state, that just being. And yet it almost begs the question of why. Is it almost just another drug to us to just be? I mean, yes, there's purpose in it, there's happiness, and yet thinking is also what makes us us. We're both. We're both things at once. We think and we do. And I think it's doing both in tandem. I think it's being conscious about being. And I think that's what I see the most in the Cynics is being conscious about being determined in every action. Because I think that's the best trait that Diogenes himself puts forward is to be deliberate in all actions. Everything he does is deliberate. Everything. No matter how vile people might see it as, he just does things because he thought about it first. He thought about everything he did. And I don't know. I would think that it's both. I really would. I think that's a bigger key is to it's not to shut yourself away in a monastery. It's to just be present, be present and really think about what you're doing. Live for you, you know?
Don't you feel like part of the terrible trick that is played on us in our minds is that we're always seeking, how do I get back to that place? How do I get back to that place? How do I get back to flow and, to just being, right? But every time you ask that question, you're doing the opposite of going back to, you're, and so
Yeah.
part of it seems to me like, and it's funny that we're talking about this because I wrote about this last night. I was exploring this exact question. It was kind of like, the one who outwits the devil is the one who realizes that he can't, that it's a terrible trick that is played on us, that there's no way out of it. So, but it's almost like you arrive at that place where, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And then, I can't. And it's in that moment where you sigh and you say, I just can't do it, that there's a little bit of it, it arrives a little bit. And that's, it's so interesting. I had this conversation with Sharon LaBelle and Peter Samus. Oh, I really hope I didn't get his name wrong, but that's okay. He'll forgive me. He's a wonderful person. But he's this beautiful human being. We were talking about, he said something that was so profound. He said something like the original sin was breaking the whole down into parts through language, because it's at that point, let's say you're Adam and Eve or, whatever primordial being, you're simply a part of the consciousness of the whole. And you need food, you'll find it. You don't have to think, where am I, you're wandering through this very strange landscape, but perhaps you're not conscious of that. And so you're just acting. You're not perhaps acting, it's you're being. But then you break it down into words and you start, well, that's this and that's this and that's this. Oh, it's like an explosion, right? Where, okay, and this is the whole story of the Bible. It's like just when he said that, the original sin of breaking the whole down into its parts, I'm like, man, okay, so you're in Eden, you fall, and Adam starts naming things, with the help of God, I guess. And it's that story that keeps on repeating over and over again in our cultures and in our individual lives, in our souls, of being in the garden and then falling straight back out of it and being in a desert. And for me, it's like when I'm playing piano, I'm in a garden. When I get into that space, I'm in a garden and I'm right there and nothing else in the world is happening except me and the piano, And then when I'm doing emails throughout the day, when I'm, doing all my, little tasks for business and stuff like that, I think, man, Seneca's so right. Business is the enemy of philosophy. It's like you
Yeah.
just, you fall into a desert and you just, oh gosh, there's so much to do, so much to do, so much to do. And you're on the treadmill again. And you sit at the piano again, and you go back to that garden. It's like,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Maybe that's the point of the Tao, is to really think of both states, of both the garden and the desert, and being comfortable in both and flowing between both
Yeah.
as they come.
Yeah.
I think that's, I think that's real meditation. A lot of Buddhist monks will kind of explain that that chatter in your brain is normal. It's very normal. And to really meditate, it's to live with that. It's not to stop it and just have nothing. It's doesn't work that way. It's that both are happening at the same time, simultaneous. And I think it's being comfortable with both the depths of your mind and the uncomfortability that comes with that. And, more, I don't know. I think there's a flow to all things, to the depths of your mind, but also the depths of the universe itself. And I think it's navigating both simultaneously and weaving in and out of those that really, I think that's, you know, I don't really know how to put it into words. It's once you really get into these big concepts, I don't think you can put it into words. I think once you really see it and really you're able to dance with it a bit, you can't really put what it is into words. It is.
Yeah.
And, no matter how you get there through religion or meditation or psychedelics, we're just thinking. There's the sense of what all means and nothing means. I think really truly understanding that, by understanding that you don't understand it and it just is, and all you can do is marvel at it. I think that's it's such an insane thing that we can't even put it into words. It's impossible. Try as we might.
Well, I think that what you said there is so important in terms of all you can do is marvel at it. I mean, you get to that point, and I think this for me has perhaps been so when you get a taste for what it might mean to live in agreement with nature, as in you have an individual excellence, individual virtue about you, a spark within you that connects you to the whole, that if you would do that thing, it would prove to you that there is a lot more at play than just your individualistic pursuit of what you think you want to do. There's a mover within, and without at the same time. And when you get a picture of that, when you and to me that has come through poetry and music, mostly poetry, I'd say, because that was the biggest surprise to me. Music, I always knew that was what I was about. Poetry, I never knew. And then it hit me, and it's like, oh, okay. So that's part of my nature, and I don't really get to choose that. And that's just there. I mean, to me, that did make me marvel at this thing called life. It did bring me into a deeper relationship with the divine, because there is something so divine about the infinite complexity of whatever it is that we're all doing here. And it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it throws you into the deep end with no life jacket and says swim,
Yeah.
But on the other, that level of it's like it's the deepest ocean you could swim in, but it's also the firmest foundation you could have beneath you. To me, it seems like it's that double-edged sword sort of thing.
It drowns a lot of us. It takes a lot of
Yes.
us. I think there are a lot of people that see it that they don't know how to survive it. And it's hard. It's hard for a lot of people. I think some of the biggest, what you would call geniuses we've ever had, people who have towering intellects, a lot of them have killed themselves.
Yeah.
Because I think I think that our minds are not built to fully comprehend comprehension. So the more ability you have to do that, the more errors kind of come out of that. Because even though you can go deeper and deeper, it also works against you if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And it's scary. I mean, who among us hasn't had a hard night? You know? And it's hard to think about. It's really just the sheer depth of how far you can go. Quick
What's that
note,
quote
can we do a cut?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I just got to go pee real quick. That's cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, man.
Cool. We'll just do a quick little. I'll rejoin the session in just a second.
Sure.
My sister's sick. I gotta talk to her real quick too.
No worries. Yeah. I'll just pause the recording. I'll start it when we get back.
All right, I'm back. We're doing it.
Where were we?
Had a little intermission. Feeling refreshed.
Yeah, man. Round 2. Let's go.
Round 2. Yeah.
So I have to pick up on something if that's okay. So, I think you're so right that you can drown in this ocean, and it can take over, and it can be too much to handle. Ashley McCall, he recently reminded me of that Nietzsche quote. What is the measure of a man is how much truth he can handle? Something like that. It's pretty true. But I had this interview on another guy's podcast. He's actually another poet from Perth, and he sent me an episode to listen to his show, and he read some poetry. And I was like, man, all the symbolism that you're using there is it's like all the symbolism that's embodied in my poetry. And, this guy, we were on the same wavelength. Like, he just understood deeply who I am as a person, as a poet, as an artist, and he called me out a few times, and I loved it. It was great. Like, because I've got all this poetry, but what I struggle with is having the courage to actually put it out there, because it's so strange, because it's partaking in somewhat of and it's taken me so long to actually say this confidently. It's participating in a certain mystic tradition, and that is awkward to say in our modern times. But this guy, he was, he basically said to me, it's like, what's going on is you're basically afraid that you're going to be wrong. You're afraid that what you have is not sufficient. But he just said, like, stop, stop doing that to yourself, because and this is another thing that I've talked about with Sharon and many people. It's like, when you come to this certain philosophical point where you're wrestling with questions this fundamental, one of the things that's happened to me is I'm slowly starting to reintroduce the lexicon that you might find in more religious spaces. Words like holy or sacred, or, even the sage is something that perhaps is a little bit irksome for some people, or the saint, or divinity. These are all extremely loaded terms, but they're terms that perhaps personally for me, once I have arrived, which I haven't arrived at anything, once you see a certain way, you can't help but use those words, but it's awkward at the start, and it takes a while to get back into it, so yeah, it's just, I resonate with so much of what you're saying, and I just appreciate it. It's such a necessary conversation.
Well, 2 points first. Let me ask you a question. Let me write something down real quick.
Sure.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's that you're afraid of being wrong? Or do you think it's that you're afraid of your idea being wrong? Or do you think it's that your idea won't be accepted? Or do you think deep down it's because of the fear that you won't be accepted?
Oh, I think it's
Because I
probably a mix of all of the above. Yeah.
I think I think number four there, I think the last one, I think that's something that is at the root of anything having to do with ego is when you create something, when you put something out there, that is an extension of you. It's something you did. It's something that you put yourself into. And for it to be not accepted is for you to not be accepted. But I think that's a fallacy. I think it's a logical fallacy that we all do. I do it especially. I don't when one of the greatest gifts I ever gave myself, and I surprised I had never tried it before. Here in the United States now, Delta 8 THC and Delta 9 THC are now legal. Well, I think they've kind of always been, but it's now you can buy marijuana that is at Delta 8 levels, which is just, it's a kind of measurement of how much THC to CBD there's in it. And it's legal. You can just get it pretty much anywhere in my state. And which my family could listen to this. This is not something I've shared with them. Something I've never done before while I was high. I did the other day, and I learned Spanish. I sat down and I tried learning Spanish, and I watched this very beautiful, talented lady on YouTube. She's got a channel called Butterfly Spanish, and I watched her do the ABCs in Spanish, and suddenly I was a child. Because one, I have a photographic memory. And so I can access memories when I'm in that state that are, it's almost like a shamanic kind of a thing. And I can access what it was like to be in a classroom learning this when I was in Montessori, when I was a kid. And it unlocked something in me that I had never really thought about. And I've been thinking a lot. This last couple of weeks has been one of the greatest leaps in how I think and what I think ever since my last birthday that I think I've had in years. Something's changed in me. I can't put my finger on what, but in a way it feels like a reset. Maybe it's from learning a new language. I hear that happens when you really start getting into learning a new language. The world is different. You start seeing it through a child's eyes again. But the greatest thing that in school have taught me, because I've been writing so much, and I've been giving my writing to teachers, and I've gone into it knowing, I've gone into it after taking a class in Stoicism, knowing specifically the epistemology and ontology of the Stoic and how you should think when approaching certain things, that at least in the Stoic method, that the way I write now and what I choose to write about has been elevated in a sense, because I've come to a realization, just like we were talking about my professor earlier and him giving me a book because he knows me. And he knows me because I exposed myself, because I showed him, because I wrote, and I wrote what I wanted to write about. And I spoke to him about what I wanted to speak about. I wrote a paper for my anthropology class about fear. I think if fear is two-sided, I think it's the great leveler. I think it's a great tool that we use. If I wasn't afraid of certain things, I would never improve. If I didn't care about getting better about Spanish, say I wanted to learn Spanish, right? If I don't have that healthy little dose of fear, I I won't improve because I'll say, this is fine. It doesn't matter what other people think. Well, then how am I communicating? These little tiny fears, I think, push us. But at the same time, I think the biggest fear that I had with Spanish that reset for me was I was afraid of sounding incorrect. I was afraid of making a fool of myself. And then when I realized, oh wait, I don't care about making a fool of myself. I'm learning as though I were a child. Like I'm in my room at 2 a.m. on Sunday learning head, shoulders, knees, and toes in Spanish, cabeza rodillos. No. Cabeza. Oh, I can't remember it. That's how bad I am right now. That's Oh, no, I do remember it. Cabeza, hombros, rodillos, pies. Yeah, I remember it. So it's two different modes of thinking. When I'm thinking abstract, it's really hard to dial in and try to speak a language. I don't think we realize how these little fears like really influence us. But I think the biggest fear that there is, it's not being wrong. It's not being accepted. We are so wired from tribal society that to not be accepted is death. We are eusocial creatures. We are pro-social creatures. Our entire being is existent because of working together. And to not be accepted by your tribe, by your family, is death. Exile. Like, look at the Stoics. Look at how many Stoics were exiled for various reasons. Seneca was. Exile is death. Because in the ancient world, if you weren't a part of the network, it's still the same now. It's just the network is so vast that it's hard to not be a part of it in most parts of the world now. Or at least some network. But we're wired for that. We're wired to be accepted, and to buy into that fear of not being accepted is to make yourself a slave in your mind.
Yeah.
If you have something to put out there, put it out there, because it doesn't matter what people think about it. It will never matter. It's about what you think about it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you ever have to share it. But don't put it out there for them. Put it out there for you because you feel like it needs to be out there. What they think of it shouldn't influence the direction you go in or anything. It is you. It's you being honest. In the LGBT community, there is the concept of coming out. Coming out as, it's a big deal for a lot of people because in a way it's a rebirth, but it's an honesty. It's saying, this is who I am. And it's not an identity I'm choosing necessarily. This is who I am. This is how I was born. And, I speak from personal experience with this. It doesn't matter what the other people think of it. You want them to still look at you fondly, but in the end, it's about being honest. It's about being who you are and not letting anybody else take that from you. It's about not giving in to expectations from others. It's about you are who you are. And what you put out there is, it doesn't matter what people think of it. It's you. And more often than not, we are accepted. We are. I think that this is, for all of the problems that we're going through in my country right now, I think that's one of the greatest things my little brother and sister have shown me is that their generation, these young folk, are much more accepting than mine was and the ones before that. That if someone, like they're familiar with kids that are trans in their classes, very familiar, and nobody cares. It's just fine. Just don't be annoying, like be you, just don't annoy me. Like
Yeah.
don't overstep your bounds as a person, and we're fine. They have more of an idea of what a personal moral code is, I think, than a lot of people my age do, which is weird. It's not something I expected to see in the Gen Z, but it
Mm.
is. It's there. There's a level of acceptance that I was not expecting. But I don't think the goal is to try to be accepted, just as the goal is not to try to be a sage. The goal is to seek virtue in all things. It's
Yeah.
to seek wisdom. And by doing so, you could become a sage, but who cares about becoming a sage? Just be what? Like just seek wisdom. If
Yeah.
know that you know nothing. That's what why else did the Oracle of Delphi call Socrates the wisest person? Because he was the one who dared, in a society of, I don't think people understand the cultural significance of saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. In a society of, if you are a philosopher, like in the early pre-Socratic philosophers and the sophists, for you to say, I don't know what I'm talking about, is to take away any of the ethos that you have. It's to take away any of your credibility.
Yeah.
He didn't care about credibility. He cared about honesty and telling the world as it was, not as we wish it to be. Diogenes did that too. Tell the world who you are. Like not as you would like to be, but as you are. Not as you would like them to like you, but just be you. Put that out there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's beautiful. Man, what a monologue.
I'm
like,
sorry.
like
I
no,
talked
no,
a
no,
little while,
no, no,
didn't I?
no.
I
I
apologize.
mean that in the most beautiful sense I can. That it, like everything that you said there just hits. It hits hard, And somebody like Seneca says that the great teacher chooses their words carefully and aims right, like you hit me, man. You hit me with a lot of that stuff. And it makes perfect sense. And here's the thing, like even dogmatically, we can all agree that to the Stoics, like being accepted, that's not the thing. It's not the thing. and I think I heard David Feidler yesterday in an interview with Chris Fisher. He was talking about how for the Stoics, it's like two things. Virtue is the only good. That's it. And then know that most things are out of your control, but there's a few things that you can. Just put those up against. That's it. That's all. Go.
Yeah.
Like, and that. Yeah, I think that there's something. So because when he was saying that, I had an image in my mind, and the image was blackness, but then two little dots. That's it. That's what we're going towards. And I just think, especially as an artist, there has to be that point where the artist lifts the cloak that is hiding them, and says, this is what I am, like you say. And it's at that point when the cloak is lifted that they become the true artist. Because an artist cannot be fake or false, because then they too easily become a propagandist, and so I think that that's, because I've tried in this path of Stoicism to live by the spirit of Stoicism and not specifically by the dogma of Stoicism. That has meant over the past 5 years, 6, 7 years, many chops and changes in my direction. Many,
Yeah.
because like this is what Emerson said. I'm trying to live by this as much as I can, because this is one of the most brilliant things he ever wrote. He said, With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He says, speak the truth of today in hard words and speak tomorrow's truth in hard words. Like,
Yeah.
wow. So forget about that kind of like sunk value fallacy where I was this person for so long and I need to keep on being that person because I've invested so much in that. Or, forget about, your dogmatic approach to, well, I have to be this. This is what I have to be. No, live by the wisdom of you're trying to first perhaps assume that you don't know who you are, and then assume that there's a great adventure to be had if you will take those first steps to try and understand who you are. And as you're doing that, as I said, lifting that cloak and allowing people to come in and see you for who you truly are. So I know I'm just repeating a lot of what you said, but it hits hard with me, man. And I think it's vital information.
And you'll never wear just one hat in your life.
Yeah.
You'll never be just one thing. So don't limit yourself to that. Because by definition, understanding who you are is understanding the limitless potential within your own mind, for one, but also it's knowing that within yourself is many different people around almost like a central theme. You're a different person to each person you talk to.
Yeah.
Every single relationship is different. And so there is a consistency there. You don't want to, like, a lot of people talk about not being true to yourself. Well, I don't even know what that means, because I think by definition, you can literally only be true to yourself, because you can't be true to anybody else. You can only be in your own mind. It's about understanding. I think it really is. It's saying, I don't know, but this is what I think. This is what I think in this moment. This is what, you could talk about what you thought, how that's changed. You can postulate on what you might think, but as long as you realize that you think, you don't know, you think, and you are, and that's it. This is who I am. That's it. But
yeah, but it's tough because that's the sort of stuff that just doesn't go down well at corporate meetings. So
who cares? Who cares? Who cares? We're here now. That's there.
Yeah.
That's there. We're here.
Yeah.
We're here. I don't give a fuck about corporate meetings right now, because I'm in the middle of a great conversation.
Yeah, man.
Like,
amen.
Why would I care what anybody else is doing? I hope that they're doing it well, whatever they're doing, but that's not now. This is now.
Yeah.
And I haven't even thought, for the last 2 hours that we were even on a podcast, I haven't even thought about an audience, because I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
They can listen to our conversation all they want. It's not about them. It's about this. It's about what we're having right now.
Yeah.
I said that the last time, and I'll say it every time if I have to.
Well, I mean, look,
there's something compelling and you can learn from that. But at the same time, this conversation, this is something that we're sharing, and for somebody listening to that, it's something that they're sharing with themselves. It's something that we're putting out there for them to consume and to think about. But in reality, at least for right now, this is us. And I think, we're not going to say or do anything that betrays that. We can't. We're just going to keep being us. And it doesn't really matter if people like it or not. It doesn't matter if it's compelling. What matters is that we're talking about it. What matters is that we're here. We're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I agree wholeheartedly. And, it's always the challenge for me. It's funny, like there was a point there where I started to notice, oh, you have a podcast persona. You know what I mean? Like,
we all do it.
Yeah, you know,
We all do.
and you can kind of just, but then I get interviewed by some people sometimes where that persona is so, it it consumes the totality of what's happening in them in that moment. So it's like, okay, you know, hey, we're going to jump onto the podcast, and then I'll do this and I'll do this, and then we'll jump into the, and then as soon as it hits record, it's like, welcome to, you know what I mean? Like it's a completely different person. Now, I think I've done an okay job of slowly walking away from that, and like I do it better with some people. I would say, like with you, I find it much more comfortable to just have the conversation. But
Yeah.
you know, in the same way where Seneca, he's talking about walking away from retirement. You know, like he's sorry, from the life of business and everything. He says you don't have to jump out of this immediately. You can kind of slink away slowly, just pull yourself out of it a
Yeah.
little bit, like by little bit, make that progress. And I guess you could say, and this is perhaps a, you know, an interesting thought on this subject. I mean, look at what happens when somebody decides that that's what they're going to do. I mean, Joe Rogan, his whole thing is screw the audience. I'm just going to talk
Yeah.
to somebody who I love, and we're just going to talk, and we're going to smoke weed. We're going to have a cigar. We're going to drink some whiskey. Yeah. We're just going to talk about whatever we want to talk about. Fuck the audience. Yeah. You know, like, and look what happens. 11 million downloads an episode. Look what happens when that happens. Now, there's a lot of luck and fortune that he was in the right place at the right time in many things.
And a lot of work, yeah.
But he got there because of who he is. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
It's wild that we live in this landscape where we can see it so clearly now, because you can change channels. You can go to a different program and you can see somebody who is still so in that persona. Has it ever been easier, do you think, to
well, let's extrapolate.
See that, you know?
Exactly. Let's extrapolate, because this is a universal human principle. I was catching up on some of your podcasts today. And today was I was listening to the most recent episode with Stoic Dan. And I ended up going and I got food at a place, and I went and I sat in a booth, and I still had my headphone in, and I had a server greet me, and I was just sucked into the podcast. So I kind of was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I'll just get a water, and just, we're not going to have a conversation, she's going to do her job, and I'm going to pay her, we're not going to be friends. That's not how it works. And I didn't even realize I had fallen into it until I heard her say, and sometimes people really take you out of it. I think I've talked to you before about a lady doing that to me at a supermarket. She said something that was a platitude I had never heard, and it took me completely out of it. And I said, oh, I didn't even remember the last 15 minutes, But this girl, she put something down. I said, thank you. And she said, of course. And she started to walk away. And I was like, that's what I say every time I take food to a table. I say the exact same thing. And so the next time she came by the table, I said, can I ask you a question? I took my headphone out and made eye contact, and I had a conversation with this person that I had treated like a service, and I hadn't even realized I had been doing it. And I was like, hey, do you realize the platitudes that you do, like when you greet tables? And I was like, because what you did was you put this down. I said, thank you. And you said, of course. And I was like, and that's the exact same thing that I do every time. I don't mean to. It's just I have a million things I'm thinking about. I'm not even supposed to be running very much food, because I'm up at the pass, and I'm supposed to be organizing it and making sure everything's right, and talking to the kitchen, talking to the servers. And if there's nobody run food, sometimes I'm like, well, I got to run it. And so if somebody asks me for something, that takes me out of it too. And so I told her, it's like, do you notice? Do you ever notice? And she goes, she stopped being in work mode, and it changed. It changed for two different reasons. One, because I was leveling with her. We had a shared experience. Yeah. More than just the moment. We had a shared experience. We both serve, we We serve guests on a regular basis. And it was she changed her demeanor, because suddenly it wasn't about a job, it wasn't that she was serving me. Suddenly we were having a conversation, and she stopped being a server and started being herself. And we talked about it. And so every time she would come by the table, it would be a different interaction where she'd be like, "Hey, man," instead of like, "Excuse me, sir." It was, "Hey, man." I was like, okay, so this is the real you. This is who I wanted to see in the first place. This is who I wanted to be. I wanted to be, "Hi, what's up? What's going on? How are you doing?" Like, talk to somebody like normal, not, "Hey, how are we doing today, guys?" Like,
Oh man,
who cares
yeah.
about that?
I
And
recognize
so,
that from my trips to America. Is that, hey, how you doing today, man? Yeah,
yeah, we doing
yeah,
all right? All right. Tequila
yeah,
shots?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Man, you've got it down. It's exactly right. The
Oh,
archetypes
because
of
I
serving.
do it for
Yeah,
a job. That's
yeah,
why.
yeah,
Because I don't have it down pat because I'm doing an impression. I'm just recalling memories at this point.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
Hey
Yeah.
guys, how are we doing tonight? It's not hard to do, to slip into it, because you do have stuff in your head, and you get, if you were a server that was just completely genuine with every table, which I know some, you're not always the best server, because you're trying to juggle a lot of things at once. It's kind of hard to genuinely have a conversation and try to, like, and also be thinking about the 5 tables you have and the 20 people you're serving right now, that you can't get too dialed in. You're doing a job. You are serving them. You're not wooing them. But it was just weird when, right before I left, she came by and she was like, "I'm thinking about it every time I go to tables now. Thanks, man." I was like, "It's going to be a hard day. I'm sorry. It's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
harder for you because now you're conscious of what you're doing. Now you're being deliberate in your actions. You're having to think about what you're doing." I think I think it's a specific thing that I'm good at, is grabbing people, grabbing their attention and putting it here.
Mm.
It's something I think that I demand. I'm needy. I
You're the
demand that in a
Diogenes of
conversation.
the cafe diner. Yeah, you're the
But it's true. I'm used to bar conversations. I'm used to things going on around me and me going, "Hey, how are you right now? How are you?" Because I care. I care about that person, regardless of, it's not like we have to be different here than we can be somewhere else. I'll have the same conversation that I'll have with you in private in the middle of a crowd. I don't care.
yeah,
I could have a conversation. I could be up on stage giving some sort of lecture or something like that, and still have a conversation with somebody who walks up to the microphone, just like anybody else. Because that's what the moment demands. That's what that relationship demands.
yeah.
Demands being genuine, you know?
And I
It's
so
not
hope,
objectifying.
I just so hope that we get to have a conversation in the middle of a crowd one day. Like this.
Oh, we will.
You already know my plans when I'm coming over there to America. Just heading around, doing little house concerts, and some. Yeah, we'll figure something out. We'll
Of
figure
course we will.
something out because it's too good of an opportunity to miss. But like I'm so inspired by what you're saying, because uh, that's the state where you recognize, man, if I could be like that as much of the time as possible, freedom, that's the freedom of the soul that we're all
Mm.
aiming at, right? Like is to have no other expectations other than that you will show up how you are, where you are, who you are, you know, right now.
Yeah.
And to be happy with that, to be satisfied with that. There's a true joy that comes from that. Uh, and I suppose we do that by weeding out these poor seeds in our mind that tend to lead us down these directions of feeling as though we can't live in that space. But I don't know. I think that we're living in one of the most incredible times in history where more and more people are waking up to the fact that that's the way to be, and we can do that. And especially with the internet, where
Yeah.
you can find a group of people who enjoy what you're saying, and you've got something to say, you've got something to be, and they'll see that. And um yeah, I'm just so interested to see what happens in the next 20, 30, 40 years, because it's heading
I
in the
am too.
direction, like I think that people are slowly starting to wake up, and they no longer want to be provided people who think that they know better telling others how they should be better from a script. In the same way that I would, you point to somebody like Joe Rogan, you say, okay, 11 million downloads per episode, way more than any of these, more legacy media stations. And you think people are making up their minds.
Yeah.
They want authenticity, they want openness, they want vulnerability, they want you. That's what they want. And so man, we're in a powerful time. Hey, powerful time.
Yeah. I think by definition, I think every moment in the present is a powerful moment because it's now. There's only one now. And I think we live in a turbulent time but I can't really imagine any other way. I've tried to do that before, where I try to imagine myself in a different time and who I would be, but I'm not. I'm not in that time, and I don't have the reference. I'm here and I'm now, and that's what matters. I've done that a lot. You know, when I can actually like physically access memories in the way I can, it's almost like a drug because it's not a normal nostalgia. I don't think everybody can. I think my brain works in a way that most people's don't. And, I don't say that with hubris. I say it because I haven't really seen this out of very many other people, but I can, when I'm in the right space, I can live in my mind for hours. I've always been able to. I can do extreme vivid daydreams. And I think it's one of the most dangerous things, even though it's one of the most fulfilling and fun things. I think it's one of the most dangerous things because I think it distracts me from the moment itself. It's hard to be a part of the moment when you're deep in a waking daydream that you don't even have to close your eyes for, when you're just so far off somewhere else. And that's, I think it's a blessing and a curse, but personally, I think, we had that one meetup recently with Sharon where she talked about the moment and we just sat in it for a while. We all just experienced it. And she played a piece of music and it's fantastic. It was a great time. And I think we should do that more just as people, just realize the moment that we're in. Because even though, yeah, I'm excited for seeing how things are going and how things change, I'm more excited to see what happens in the next 5 minutes than I am. And I'm excited to see where this conversation goes, or, if it ends, what happens next. Then like reading a book, I'm always excited to see what happens next. I don't know. Sorry, a bit of a bit of a departure, but
you're reminding me of Alan Watts. He said, if you're always wondering what's happening next, then when what's next happens, you won't be there to see it.
I've been listening to Alan recently.
He's wild. What a
they're on Spotify now. His son,
cool.
as of last year, has been pitting. So maybe once a month or so, he's putting on he's curating a selection of the talks, and then he's kind of building a narrative off of that.
Great.
And so I think it is Alan Watts that you're listening to. I think it's also his son being able to create a narrative of who he felt like his dad was based on the order that he's putting the talks in.
That's cool.
Based on what he's trying to convey with it.
Yeah.
He's not there to sell you anything. He's not there to try to sell the sets of talks. He's there to take you on the journey that he felt like his father was trying to take you on.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. It's high time that Alan Watts is on Spotify. It's so accessible. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
But if we start talking about Alan Watts, we'd be talking for the next 10 hours.
You've been listening to the Walled Garden Podcast. If you'd like to attend any of our free meetups and events, or if you'd like to get one-on-one mentoring with either Sharon LaBelle, Kai Whiting, or myself, just go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, don't forget to nourish those gardens in your mind.